All right. Very excited about having a conversation with Greg. It's like, as Max said, an icon in the industry. So let me introduce for maybe only few of you who don't know you, Greg. So Greg is the founder of Attain Enterprises, which includes Attain Partners, Attain Capital, and Attain Sports. And Attain Partner is a consulting firm serving education, nonprofit, healthcare, and government market. And Attain Capital invests in technology-driven solutions for government and education, while Attain Sports owns several professional baseball and soccer teams. It's crazy how you're doing all of this, right? We'd love to learn that. And Attain's federal division was sold to Maximus in 2021. So before founding Attain, Greg held senior leadership role at Unisys and KPMG. Recognized for his innovation and entrepreneurship, Greg has received numerous leadership awards, including the Lifetime Achievement Award at Wash Exec's annual Pinnacle Awards. In 2022, Greg and his wife, Camille, made a gift to George Mason University's School of Business to create the Greg and Camille Baroni Center for Government Contracting. First of its kind university center to address business, technology, policy, regulation, and issues in government contracting. So we are also involved with that. So TechnoMile is very proud of supporting.
Thank you for your support.
And this is something really good that you have done. So Greg also serves on the board of NVTCs and support various charitable organizations, including Women's Center and National Kidney Foundation. So thank you, Greg, for being here.
I want to meet this guy.
So Greg, I thought we'll break this down with a little bit about your personal journey, your insight into leadership, and then tell us a little bit about the industry and what you see coming down. So we all familiar with all your achievements. So tell us a little bit about some pivotal experience early in your career that sparked your passion for government contracting. Maybe take you back.
Well, that's like rewinding, back to the 20th century, 21st? I don't know. I hate to say how long ago it was, but I'd say there are a couple areas. I actually really grew up in more of serving the education market. And during my time at KPMG, I became their national managing partner of the education business. And there were a couple things that sparked that entrepreneurial spirit. One in which had to deal with, since I had the education market, we had the birth of the internet. You might remember today, now it's old news, it's just standard fare, back in the mid-90s. And having grown up in the education business, I was looking at teaching and learning, and I said, that's an area that hasn't changed in over 500 years. It's still more of a sage on the stage model. And we said, what if we could change teaching and learning into more of an anytime, anyplace model? And instead of just having episodic assessment, have continuous assessment. And so I had an ed tech group that I started to formulate. We partnered with a professional association called EDUCOM, first to define standards and then to develop a prototype. And then we said, there might be a business here. Anybody know what that business became? Spun out in 1997 from KPMG, and some of you may have even used it. It became a learning management system platform that became the standard in the education industry, and that's known as Blackboard. So that actually came. So how many of you became Blackboard users? So, oh, wow. I love that. Okay. So I did not leave KPMG because we were in the middle of separating our consulting business from the parent, audit and tax. But I did help. I was the first chair of that board. I actually seeded the capital and was one of the original 3 founders. And later, it would go public in 2004, then purchased by Providence Capital in 2011, and I would say, unfortunately, purchased by Anthology a couple years ago. So, but that was the first exposure I had really had that was of substance. And then having two very large and very, I think, shaping experiences at KPMG, private partnership, and then later at Unisys as their president. And people scratch their heads, why did you go from KPMG to Unisys? And it was a unique time. I really thought, what a great opportunity to see if we can return this former giant in the hardware business into a relevant player in the technology market. And I would then take over here in the greater Washington area and say, and by the way, I joined on October 1st, 2001. And of course, if most of you may remember, that was just a few days after 9/11. And so I would look at this as an opportunity to pivot the government contracting business toward Homeland Security. As you know, a few short months after 9/11, a new agency would be created called the Transportation Security Administration Agency. And I would take the assets we had at Unisys and say, what if we positioned ourselves to serve this new agency, and we would actually win this opportunity. I mean, we were not expected to win. Tom probably remembers that everybody in the market expected EDS with Lockheed Martin to win that, but Unisys would end up winning that. And I would just say that I had a pivotal role in shaping our go-to-market strategy, our most of you know capture that term, and it was all about formulating a group of teaming partners that included IBM and DynCorp. I see we had Matt here earlier. And we partnered with a whole bunch of other firms to actually surprise the industry and win that opportunity. And for me, I was fortunate because my CEO would give me relief of my international job so that I could really focus in on that. And that became an opportunity that I really enjoyed, and I loved immersing myself in those markets. And but the downside of that was I was in another company, and of course most of you know how many have worked in a public company before? So you know then when I say there are quarterly earnings targets, what that means. And one of my frustrations is that we really served the shareholder, meaning that we were willing at times to trade off the long-term value of a company to get that short-term earnings result. And so I would come out of that experience feeling frustrated. And so when I founded Attain, it was, how do we change this whole paradigm? Take the focus off of shareholders and put it on the stakeholders that really matter. And the stakeholders are really your clients that you serve, the communities in which we all live and work, and I call that C2, and then the people, and then our partners around the people that make it possible. And so when we founded Attain, for example, we said, we're going to do something different. And we're going to take the focus off shareholders, put it on the stakeholders, and see if we can drive impact through that.
Great, and that's where we met when you started Attain. TechnoMile was proud to support Attain through the journey that you all had. So,
I think one of your people are right over here.
So, and then when you exited from Attain, and would love to know how you kept that brand name. And then
somebody just mentioned that out there too.
Yeah. And then you expanded that into Attain Enterprises. So tell us a little bit about that. What prompted you to do that, and sports, and
everything else,
technology and everything. So how did that happen?
Well, first let me tell you, founding Attain, there was kind of a two-part journey. So we did separate. You know, I remember, interestingly, I'll just say the board at Unisys and Greg Baroni parted ways with each other in 2008. You know, I don't like saying the word fire, but I was fired. And you know, it was a gut check because it was actually fortunate for me. Two search firms came hustling me right away. I was about ready to take a job as the president of SunGard. And the search firm here, you would know, it's H&S for Heidrick and Struggles. They were very happy with it, but I said, look, I need a few days. I'd like to take a period of time off. I've never really had time off. 20 years at KPMG, 7 at Unisys, and I really would like to have a break. And it was over the holiday period in 2008, and I was like, you know, I don't know whether I'm ready for this. Now, you don't know, SunGard at that time was owned by 7 private equity firms. And I was thinking to myself, that's kind of like shareholders again. And I honestly just, having poured myself in both Unisys and KPMG, I wasn't ready to do that again. And so I thought maybe it made sense to develop, you know, just do some consulting work. So we had to set up a company. Now, does anybody know the original name of Attain, by the way? And see, my chief marketing officer's over here and saying, don't you dare say it.
Bearing Point?
It wasn't Bearing Point, but thank God it wasn't. That was the transition name from KPMG Consulting to, as you called it, Bearing Point. Well, I'm not going to say it because my chief marketing officer is going to kill me if I say it, but I'll just say one of my partners, co-founders of Attain, his name was John O'Neill, and John came to me and said, Greg, we need to set this company up now. If you're not going to SunGard, you're going to do this. I said, okay. And he gave me a list of names. I picked that name. I'll just say it's X because I'm not allowed to say it. I'll just say X was a very unpopular name for a long period of time, and I was consistently ridiculed for it. And so one of the things that happened after we founded Attain, having been at KPMG had been renamed Bearing Point. They went through financial struggles, so much so that they had to parse up the company into 3 pieces. Piece 1 went to Deloitte, which was mostly the public sector assets. Piece 2 went to PwC, which is the commercial assets. And then there was something called the leftover estate. Because those 2 are auditing firms, some of them had conflicts. So the leftover estate was auctioned off. Attain would win that and would actually take possession August 28th of 2009. And it was at that point we decided to really name the company. So you're asking me, how do we retain it? So question number 1, how do we retain? So first of all, you have to know we did a naming contest. Chief Marketing Officer Ellen Walsh back here, she won it, and that's how Attain, she actually came up with the name. Turned out the name was actually also owned, the domain name was owned by a friend of your family, a friend of her family. And so that's how we got www.attain.com. So one of the things that, as we were considering spinning off Attain, and she's really responsible for having built the brand name that you now know as Attain, she said, you cannot sell that. You can sell the assets, you cannot sell the name, the brand. But we had to let Maximus use it for 2 years. And so they did, and then 2 years to the date, we reabsorbed that name. Now, you asked another question, which was, what happened? You sell it? What next? Actually, I was scratching my head too, what next at that time. We had a leftover piece of the business. It was our education and nonprofit business. It was very small. We had about almost 50 people, right? About 50-ish people, including infrastructure left. And it was actually a very tough time because it's just in the immediate aftermath of COVID. And during COVID, higher education institutions got slammed hard. All their revenue sources, from tuition and revenue to housing and dining to their research. So a lot of our business in that area had dried up. And so it was kind of a bleak period, but I also feel an obligation. One of the things that you probably heard, and I know Tom had heard me say this many times, is when we founded Attain, Attain was a built-to-last, next-generation, values-driven company. Built to last meaning never for sale. And so there was a concern, well, you have this leftover business, what are you going to do with it now? And I felt a real obligation to the people and to that client base that we had, so we're going to invest in it. And so part of my capital we got from the proceeds went right back into making sure Attain would be a viable entity going forward. But it was so small, and I was also being approached by entrepreneurs. Got them, where are you? Where are you sitting right now? Are you here?
Yeah, he's right there.
There, I can't see. Oh, there you are. So I was approached by entrepreneurs like Gotham who said, look, can you share the wisdom? And I said, I would be willing to share the wisdom of what I did, but I want to also be invested in it. I want to have skin in the game with you. And so we started with now called Attain Capital. We have 5 companies under management today where we do that. We work with, and in fact, I call it operator-led, meaning we're not like your traditional capital source, like Veritas and Arlington Capital that you heard from Mac. We're a capital provider that's going to start with giving you practical guidance. When you need help with capture, we know how to do that. When you need help with pattern recognition on who makes a good sales executive. So we're not just going to sit on the board and send in financial engineers. You could acknowledge that. I mean, we get in there, we help with your partners, we help with your clients. And so it's a different kind of capital firm. And yeah, we want to share in the return from growing the company. So that's Attain Capital. And sports was almost by accident. And so the story goes like this. I am a lifelong baseball fan. Actually, I would say I love the sport so much. Many of you don't know this, but I was good enough that I actually played in minor league baseball in the independent leagues in Southern California. And so for me, it was one of my colleagues knowing that. He comes to me one day and he says, this is like about a month or so after the sale. He says, Greg, you weren't good enough to play, but you've always talked about potentially being an owner. What about being an owner of a minor league baseball team? I said, sounds great to me. So what do we do? He said, I don't know. And I said, well, here, let's look in Google. Now we do ChatGPT. And so I literally go, sports investment banking, minor league baseball. And up pops a company in in Germantown, not Germantown, closer to Frederick, called Sports Advisory Group. And the name is on there. His name is Tommy George, by the way. And there's a phone number. Let's call. We literally call, and he answers. And we tell him what we're thinking about doing. And he says, you're not going to believe this, but there are actually some opportunities here. And by the way, my investment is only for this region. It's affectionately known as the DMV. And so I said, I want only assets that are in the DMV. He says, you're not going to believe it, but Bowie Bay Sox and the Frederick Keys are on the market. I said, really? I said, well, we might be interested. And so that's how the journey began. Now, I thought it was supposed to be fun. And I've learned, that a couple things. I'd say it is utterly addictive. Once you're in, you're really part of an incredible ecosystem. And at times I feel it's financially irresponsible, but it's just one of the things that we've learned, Ellen and I, and I'll just tell a quick little anecdote. Tom would probably appreciate this, but when we sold our federal division, I'd say we were one of the stronger firms in the mid-size category for government contracting. And it was a very difficult decision we as a board made. But as we proceeded through the journey, we did it, obviously. And in the end, when the deal consummated, I think we got one article in the trade publication you all know in this market here, Washington Technology, I should say, with Nick Wakeman. Great. But that's standard fare in our industry. It's good. I buy this little team, and I'm telling you, these 2 little teams. First of all, Major League Baseball says to me, are you going to host a press conference? Now, this is December of 2021, and I'm thinking, too close to the holidays. I tell Ellen and I, say, well, this press conference for minor league baseball? Okay. We push them off, and we say, we'll do something in the new year, 2022. Comes into January of 2022, and we say, you know what? We'll just issue a press release. Nobody really cares about this. Wow! Wow! We press that press release, and we're getting mainstream media calling us and wanting to know what's going on, and who are you, and what's Attain Sports. And I'll tell you two things we've learned in that journey. Number one, people love sports. It's so embedded in our culture, and they own the team, the community, the people own, fans own that. I learned that fan is actually short for fanatics. And fans really love their teams. And so you're really a steward of a public trust when you take ownership of a team. I'm telling you, when I walk into the stadium, people tell me, you know, I like this, I don't like that. It's like sometimes I want to go hide because I'm afraid, you know, I'm going to be accosted if we're not winning. But anyway, so steward of public trust. And the second thing I tell you, it's a megaphone. You know, I never realized this, but sports, because it's so embedded in our culture, becomes a megaphone for societal trends and change. And if you really want to have a way to capture that and be a part of it in a positive way, owning a sports team is certainly one way to do it. Sorry for
you're
that.
Applying the Moneyball principles all while you're building this. But when you see your journey from like the executive at Unisys, and we have so many of the leaders here that are in the GovCon space, to founding the company and now an entrepreneur for various industries, how has your leadership principle evolved over time, and what advice would you give to some folks here who are wearing this different hat? I see some founders here, I see some GovCon executives, a lot of them, and then aspiring entrepreneurs as well. So leadership principle and some advice.
Well, it's a journey. You know, I think, I don't remember, there was a little story, we were talking, and prior to this, Mac and I were just musing with one of you attendees, and we were talking about, you just have to have a constant growth mindset of learning, growing, and trying to improve yourself. And if you do that, you're gonna have an incredible leadership journey. For me, it's evolved over time. I always believe you gotta have a North Star, and that North Star is kind of like this woven fabric of vision, mission, and core values. Most important core values, because that's what people live by. That's what if they think a way, they start acting a way, they behave a way, and that's how they create impact. So you want that to be connected. So I always call that the North Star. The other thing is, leadership is about relational equity. Whether it's serving clients or developing people, you know, you're building equity. And so for me, all those things are things that kind of shape who I am. And it's a journey. It's a journey.
No, and that's very insightful. I know we have limited time, so I'm going to get to the events of the election. And how do you see the incoming administration?
See, I was hoping with that, said 28
I'm
seconds,
not gonna get to that
I wasn't
question.
going to get to that one.
I'm sure everyone wants to hear your opinion on that, Greg. So tell us how you see this
I'm letting
evolving.
the clock run out.
There's no clock in
No
baseball.
clock.
Is this
Oh,
gonna
yes,
be-
we do. We have a pitch clock now. Have you ever gone to the stadiums now? We have a pitch clock. That's one of the things we did to reinvent the speed of baseball.
The clock ran
1,
down.
0.
So I'm sure we have some questions here in the room as well. So we have a few minutes for.
I won't
Q&A.
avoid the question. But I mean, look, I really think, you know, if you were tracking the lightning rod individual, and you could see the trends happening similar to 2016. So to me, I think he'll follow a little bit of the playbook. But the reality is a lot of what shapes us in this industry transcends what goes on at the political level. I mean, yeah, there'll be a shift in agency priorities a little bit, so expect DHS to be a benefactor, especially around border control. But I think he'll look at the regulatory, I think, we talked about CMMC, which is hot right now, but it's interesting. Somebody asked a question about it was you, Tom, of how do I say that? Metastasizing compliance. And I would say this, on the one sense, we as part of the government contracting industry, we don't like it because it requires costs for us to stand up that infrastructure to execute it. On the other hand, it serves as a barrier to entry. So it's a double-edged sword here. So yeah, I see it happening, and I think that the bigger firms, and one of the trends you had asked about in preparation here, and one of the reasons I wanted to create the Center for Government Contracting at George Mason was to address what I see as a troubling trend in our GovCon industry, and that is the growth of what I call the barbell. A lot of small businesses and super large businesses, and there's a dearth of mid-sized businesses. And part of it is this, what we affectionately call the valley of death. Because as you try to graduate, and once you graduate, you're then dealing with Leidos and SAIC up here. And for one procurement, that's the size of your entire B&P budget. So it becomes incredibly difficult. And so we created that center that you referenced. Thank you, by the way, for being on the board. And how many of you are participate in the Greg and Camille Center of Government Contracting? If you're not, please. Oh, there we go. Thank you. Got them. But we'd love to see you more involved there because we're using that as this research and education, if you will, think tank to help address issues like that. Anyway.
So, may I have time for one or two questions? So,
I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
So Greg, the topic is driving innovation. With all the inertia, bureaucracy, et cetera, in government, which we all have to live with, your comments on how best to sell leading edge innovation to the government?
Well, I'd say two things. One is government is trying to address it with the OTAs and the SBIRs, and I hope that more vehicles like that continue to thrive so that innovation can be introduced. Because, I mean, if you look at the government procurement life cycle, it's not conducive for innovation. I mean, just think of every standard section L&M of an RFP that comes out here, right? You got to address past performance, which means you're really addressing the past, and that's going to be one of the factors or evaluation criteria that get you selected. And then they want a carryover, typically, of much of the personnel that are doing the work. So it's hard to get it. And see, at the same time, the procurement departments of the agencies and departments, they're looking at the oversight that will come back on them if they don't document it like that. And so innovation is not something that's easily traceable, if you will, or auditable. But you got to nonetheless drive it. I actually think, I learned this a long time ago. There was a book called The Discipline of Market Leaders. It's by Fred Wiersma and Michael Tracy. And they talk about three forms of sustainable differentiation. One of which is innovation, which is what the tech firms do. The other is around intimacy and relationship equity, which I was talking about. That's typically what the consultancies use. And then the third one was operational effectiveness. Think of that as like Walmart. And I think it's so important that you execute on all three dimensions and never lose sight of innovation. This industry is so desperate for the infusion of that. So, which again, I'm looking for the Center for Government Contracting to be an accelerator for that. So, does that answer the question?
Yes, sir.
Good.
So I know we have One more question. So, but then we are running out of time. But let's take one more question.
Thank you for taking my question. You have and shown a strong interest in the community. Why is that important to you, and how do you integrate that into your business model?
Why is it important? Well, it's like I talked about the growth mindset and learning, right? And I don't know about you, but there's a point at which you start realizing life is short. And you start looking for meaning, and why are you around? And for me, it was, how do I find a way to have a meaningful impact on humankind? And we talked about this, is this spirit of giving, generosity. And so for me, it's just a part of the way I can weave in and Ellen knows that this year I actually put a big theme on giving as a way to drive unity in the workforce in our business. And so for me, I don't know if I'm answering the question, but the giving part is what drives, and it's part of my DNA now. And you remember I talked about C2P2 and started with clients and communities in which we live and work. So for me, if you're familiar, I have a major commitment to the Women's Center here in Greater Washington. I'm also very involved in the National Kidney Foundation. Actually, Ellen Walsh is on the board now, representing us. Obviously, my Center for Government Contracting. And please, if you haven't checked it out at George Mason University, please do so. These are small ways I'm finding a way to give back, and I hope that spirit gets infused in all of you in this room. So thank you for asking that question.
No, thank you, Greg, for everything that you have done and everything that you are doing for the community. And we are so thankful for all the support that you give to TechnoMile.
Well,
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.